Hey, what's up? I am Ara, aka I Zebra, and welcome back to the channel. As I mentioned in my most recent YellowJackets theory video, we are diving into Tai and what is going on with her. My suspicions were correct, and even though we do not have a specific diagnosis, all signs are pointing to Tai having dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID, or by some as its old name, multiple personality disorder. For this video, I'll be referring to it as DID, as the antiquated term multiple personality disorder isn't really reflective or appropriate here. This video isn't only going to be about Tai having DID, but I think there's more to it. I believe Tai is similar to Marvel superhero Moon Knight, who is a diagnosed system or a person with DID that is serving as the avatar of the Egyptian moon deity Khonshu. I believe Tai's altar is serving as an avatar for the man with no eyes. Not to go off the rails this early, but I think the man with no eyes is one of the gods of the woods. Yes, plural. I'll explain as we go. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get to it. Quick disclaimer, since this is originally being published while season 2 is airing, this video was made after episode 6 and before episode 7. In the event new information has been revealed. Before we really dig into what's going on with Tai, let me explain more about DID. According to the DSM-5, dissociative identity disorder is described as a disruption of identity characterized by two or more distinct personality states or an experience of possession. The clinician may observe or the patient may report that these personality states demonstrate marked discontinuity in sense of self and or agency accompanied by changes in affect, behavior, consciousness, memory, perception, cognition, and or sensory motor functioning. In addition, the person experiences dissociative amnesia, otherwise known as DA, a disruption in autobiographical memory that includes gaps or difficulties in recall of everyday events, important personal information, and or traumatic events. A person with DID experiences having separate identities, known as alters, or alternate identities. Alters take over control of the person's body or behavior at various times. Each can function independently. A system is a collection of alters within one body. The entirety of a dissociative identity disorder system includes all of the alters within one body. I'll be using these terms throughout the video. Now with all of that out of the way, let's get into the logic behind my unprofessional diagnosis of Taissa Turner as a person living with DID. Let's start with the symptoms of DID. There are two major symptoms one must have to be diagnosed. One, the presence of two or more distinct personality states or an experience of possession. And the second, recurrent episodes of amnesia or gaps in short or long-term memory, including personal information, learned skills, or past traumatic events. When it comes to Tai, she clearly displays both symptoms, as we see her alter that some refer to as mirror Tai, night Tai, sleepwalking Tai, the lady in the tree, the bad one, her, or the other one. All these terms within the show and from the YellowJackets fan community are all referring to the same alter. The point being is that alter is clearly separate from Tai. We also see on multiple occasions Tai experiencing dissociative amnesia when she is back in control. For example, while her alter was in control, it would appear in Sammy's window at night in the tree outside of his room, calling out to him. She did not realize she was doing this until one day she woke up outside covered in dirt and blood. Looking at the number of Sammy's drawings, the amount of time that must have passed with Tai making those nightly appearances would have happened for a while. Tai did not recall any of the past times her alter scared her son. Not only does Tai experience the two main conditions necessary to be diagnosed with DID, there are other symptoms that are common that she experiences as well, such as difficulties in social, occupational, or personal relationships while under stress, depression, anxiety, paranoia, and insomnia. We see Tai and her alter vying for control in both the past storyline in the woods and during the present day. Obviously, surviving a plane crash and being stranded in the Canadian wilderness for 18 months is stress-inducing. In the present day, Tais symptoms started to manifest when she started campaigning for senator. We saw in season 1 the amount of stress she was under and how it affected her marriage, mental health, and relationship with her son and dog, Biscuit. People don't forget. Now that she is senator, she is not under not only constant pressure and scrutiny, but more stress. In season 2, now that she is fully aware of the extent her alter is willing to go, the depression, anxiety, paranoia, and insomnia has fully kicked in. Due to her insomnia, she gets into a car accident that landed Simone in the hospital in critical condition. Tai is very clearly unwell and seemingly getting worse, as she's now aware that her alter has returned and is vying for more control. Now that we've covered Tai's symptoms, let's step back a bit and get into what dissociation is. According to the American Psychiatric Association, dissociation is a disconnection between a person's thoughts, memories, feelings, actions, or sense of who he or she is. This is a normal process that everyone has experienced. Examples of mild, common dissociation include daydreaming, highway hypnosis, or getting lost in a book or a movie, all of which involve losing touch with awareness of one's immediate surroundings. During a traumatic experience such as an accident, disaster, or crime victimization, dissociation can help a person tolerate what might otherwise be too difficult to bear. In situations like these, a person may dissociate the memory of the place, circumstances, or feelings about the overwhelming event, mentally escaping from the fear, pain, and horror. This may make it difficult to later remember the details of the experience. Outside of when she is asleep, one instance in which Tai dissociates and her alter takes over is when they have their bacchanal feast, with Jackie, aka Snacky, as the main course. We don't realize Tai's alter was the one enjoying the festivities until the next day, when she realizes Jackie's body was eaten and starts to freak out. Eating your former teammate for survival is traumatizing without having to explain further. So dissociating for Tai was a method that she used to be able to cope with that act, which is fairly reasonable. We see her alter has an almost feral quality to her, and as Van reveals to Tai, you ate her face. Now that we know what dissociation is and how it manifests within Tai, we're going to cover what causes DID. According to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, dissociative disorders usually develop as a way of dealing with trauma. Dissociative disorders most often form in children exposed to long-term physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. Natural disasters and combat can also cause dissociative disorders. Teens are still children, so I want to make that very clear. Besides the surviving plane crash and stranded in Canadian wilderness for 18 months, part of Tai's Trauma Facts report, I believe the inciting incident connected to the initial creation and emergence of her alter was the death of her grandmother. We see flashbacks in season 1 of Tai visiting her grandmother in what I would assume is a nursing home before she dies, clearly showing they shared a close relationship as she and her grandmother seem fond of one another. The next flashback we get is at the time of her grandmother's death. Tai is with her, holding her hand. We hear her grandmother yelling at an unseen entity. She tells them she is not ready and to not take her eyes. Tai asks if it's an angel, and her grandmother responds by telling her it's a man with no eyes. It then jump cuts to Tai staring in the long mirror and seeing the man with no eyes for the first time as a reflection, and she screams in terror. The last flashback we have is of Tai at her grandmother's funeral as she opens her grandmother's eyelids and her eyes appear to be missing. We do not have any other flashbacks of Tai in between that time and when they leave for the woods, so we do not know if her alter appeared back then. However, when they do crash, it does not take long for the alter to re-emerge. Lottie is the first one in the woods to encounter Tai's alter, and that is very early on in season 1. Now that I have covered what DID is, symptoms, how DID works, and the causes in relation to Tai, I think it's safe to say my unprofessional diagnosis seems pretty spot on. With that being said, it's time to get your tinfoil hats on as we journey into the realm of wild speculation. I'm going to explain how Tai, her alter, and the man with no eyes are the YellowJackets version of Marvel hero Moon Knight. Specifically, the Disney Plus series version of Moon Knight portrayed by the insanely talented Oscar Isaac. For those of you that are not familiar with Moon Knight, let me give a brief explanation of who he is. This also contains very minor spoilers for the Disney Plus series. Mark Spector is a system diagnosed with DID, caused by early childhood abuse at the hands of his mother. As a result of the abuse, Mark dissociates and the alter Stephen Grant emerges. Mark and Stephen alternate who is the host based on what is going on. However, they are not alone. There is another alter named Jake Lockley that serves as a protector for Stephen and Mark and deals with trauma even Mark cannot handle. Mark, while on an archaeological assignment in Egypt, is left on the brink of death at a temple dedicated to the moon deity Khonshu. In the Marvel Universe, the Egyptian Ennead, or Pantheon of Gods, had mortal avatars they could imbue with powers. Khonshu decided to choose Mark as his new avatar. Mark, having DID, made him the ideal host for Khonshu, as being an avatar can deteriorate the host's mind and drive them insane. Luckily, Mark has multiple alters to deal with that. As Khonshu's avatar, Mark transforms into the hero Moon Knight, serving as the fist of Khonshu, dealing out what the deity deems to be justice. When he is in Moon Knight form, Mark's costume is not the same as his alter Stephen's. Mark appears in costume as Moon Knight, while Stephen appears as Mr. Knight. We have yet to see a suit for Jake Lockley, but I'm going to assume that alter will also have a different appearance. So what does this have to do with Tai? As of now, YellowJackets is owned by Showtime, which is currently not owned by Disney, so do not expect any crossovers here. I believe Mark's relationship with the deity Khonshu is a sort of parallel to Tai and her connection to the man with no eyes. In Moon Knight, we start by meeting the alter Stephen Grant, as Mark has now moved from being the primary host to the secondary. Stephen keeps himself chained to his bed and has sand on the floor surrounding it while he sleeps. More on that a bit. Mark first appears to Stephen by communicating to him through a mirror and telling him to relinquish control so he can suit up and save them. Moon Knight then appears to kick some butt. When Stephen wakes up the following morning, he has no recollection of what happened the night before. Mark appears to be taking control while Stephen is sleeping. Unbeknownst to Stephen, he doesn't realize it as his alter's vigilante actions as at play. He thinks he is just experiencing sleepwalking related amnesia. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Tai in season 2 tries to restrain herself while she is sleeping because her alter usually takes control while Tai is sleeping. Tai in this state also experiences a lapse in memory. While Mark, aka Moon Knight, is in control, he is serving the purposes of Khonshu without Stephen's initial knowledge or awareness. This is similar to the man with no eyes, as Tai's alter tells Van, while she's having an episode, that the man with no eyes leads her and she follows. Moon Knight is usually fighting off evil entities for Khonshu. When it comes to the man with no eyes, he seems to be leading Tai to all of the trees in the woods with a symbol carved into it, which also forms that same pattern of that symbol as Van is able to deduce on a map. This ultimately led them to find Javi, who was missing for 2 months. More on Javi later because I think he is a part of this too. Khonshu, like the man with no eyes, are both otherworldly beings influencing individuals that have fractured minds. This makes them ideal hosts and servants, as both Tai and Mark have alters available willing to do the bidding of that entity. The man with no eyes is clearly using Tai for some greater purpose. I believe, like the Egyptian Ennead, the woods has a pantheon of gods that rule over that domain. As of now, we have encountered 2 of those gods, and a potential third. In episode 6 of season 2, Lottie tells her therapist that there was a power in that woods. and the god of that place was real. Not only was it real, but the others felt it too, and it's still with them. Well, if it's anything like American Gods by Neil Gaiman, the gods travel with those that worship them. I can see the entities making their, way around. Before you start yelling in the comments, I know I said Tai encountered the man with no eyes long before she ended up in the woods. However, I do not believe that means he is not connected to them. I believe the man with no eyes is the god of death. From an interview at PaleyFest with co-showrunner Ashley Lyle, she stated, "So I think that for Taissa, who's very much not in touch with her spiritual self, and very much not in touch with her ability to believe or her faith, there's this sort of symbolic character. You could look at him as death incarnate." She further explains in relation to Tai's grandmother seeing the entity. Her grandmother was close to death and had this sort of terrifying moment where she was anticipating, the transition to the next life and expecting sort of angels and trumpets, and instead had a terrifying vision. I believe the man with no eyes is a god of death in the pantheon of gods of the woods. Well, who else is part of this pantheon? For starters, the Antler Queen. I know I have a whole theory video on the subject and have been yelling about Lottie being the Antler Queen. Now that we are deeper into season 2, I think there's more than that. I believe the way that the man with no eyes is using Tai's altar, the Antler Queen is using Lottie. Tai and Lottie both clearly have mental health conditions that I believe make them more susceptible to the influences of these spirits. Other characters seem to encounter them while they're near death, as we see with Nat when she overdoses with Travis, as well as Travis's failed attempt at a near-death experience that became a, full death experience. He admits Nat was right and is trying to get close to one of the entities, which brings me back to Javi. Javi does not speak to anyone but Coach Ben. When he tells Coach Ben, "She told me not to come back," we have yet to learn who she is. I do not believe it was Tai's altar, as it seems she was hunting and ultimately is the one who located Javi. I do not believe it is the Antler Queen either, as that entity seems to be a bit blood hungry. I believe it is a third spirit we will learn more from as the show progresses. How many spirits or gods do I believe inhabit the woods? It's hard to say. I would not be surprised if there were a deeper and older relation to this power that dates back to the indigenous people of that land. Maybe there was a tribe or a group that lived in that area and worshipped these gods in the past. As a symbol we see carved everywhere was done long before the YellowJackets arrived, and I doubt the hunter made them all himself. Like any faith system, there is iconography associated with it. In Christianity, you have the cross, Judaism, the Star of David. I believe for the spirits of the woods, the symbol we see everywhere represents that. Let's wrap this all up a bit, because I covered a lot. I believe Tai's DID made her susceptible to being influenced by the god of death of the woods, aka the man with no eyes. I believe the man with no eyes is one of the gods or spirits of the woods, along with the Antler Queen, and whatever has been communicating or is currently possessing Javi. With Moon Knight, we know Khonshu was using Mark and Steven to dole out justice. The man with no eyes goals, however, remain a bit elusive to me. What do you all think he is up to? Besides trying to make Tai walk off the same cliff Crystal died on, he led her to Javi in the past, and in the present day has worked through her altar to return her to Van and ultimately to Lottie. In that reunion shot, we get an aerial view of the compound and we can see the symbol is clearly used in the design. What does this all mean though? Well, I think it's what I said in my first YellowJackets theory video on who killed Travis. I believe the gods are calling them back to return home. By home, I mean the cabin in the woods in Canada. Well, what do you think? Am I going too tinfoil with this theory, or am I onto something? Let me know in the comments below. While you're at it, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for future uploads. See you next time. Bye!